I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This is Nick Wright. How's everybody doing today?
Doing great. CC, I got a little bit of bad news that you're not privy to yet. Jenna Wolfe is in a tough spot right now. Jenna Wolfe won a bet last night. With me. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know what's a bad thing and what's a bad sign? And Cris Carter, you'll know what I'm talking about here. When you lose a bet, you feel terribly. This morning, winning the bet, your emotion was, oh, I should have bet more.
I'm turning into...
Oh, she's hooked now.
What are they called? Betters?
When the winning bets don't feel good because you didn't bet enough, that's the beginning of reeling you on in.
I was a
Congrats.
normal, healthy person before I met your partner over here. My partner.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Right?
Added to the graveyard.
He has just infected all of us with this. All I'm going to tell you is this.
Yeah, Nick Wright, too much of Nick Wright can decline the quality of your life.
That's not true. You know what the truth is, Nick? My life is better because you're in it.
Oh, thank you very much,
Better.
Jenna Wolfe.
Even more better because you're in it. Thank you very much. It feels
your
good.
Celtics play tonight, by the way, 1-point home underdog, just letting you know.
I know.
We'll talk more about that later.
All right, so we just got to move it on in my ear, even though all I want to do is talk about how I need to make my money back. Let's start off our NBA coverage explaining the concept of friendship since we just started it. You know, if Nick's out sick, CC steps up. If CC's sick, Nick steps up. If I'm sick, we're all screwed.
Correct.
Rockets, Jazz, Game 5. James Harden, a little bit sick, not feeling great, so who steps up? His on-court BFF, Chris Paul. Stepping up big. Wow, what a night for Chris Paul. 41 points, 20 of those points in the fourth quarter. He also had 10 assists, 0 turnovers, best game of the postseason career for him. Monkey off back, I would say. Rockets are in the conference finals. Here is James Harden on Chris Paul's performance.
Unbelievable. I mean, you know, he went out there and took over the game, you know, and especially for an opportunity like, you know, he's never had before, he went to go get it. You know, he put us all on his back and said, listen, you know, I got us. That's big time right there. It's a big time performance. He got in his bag and you know, he called everybody off. He said, "You get out the way. I'm gonna put us on his back." He had that look in his eyes.
Here you go.
I mean, if he has that, I don't care what you say, but you know, and if he has that look in his eyes, you know, every single night, he's a problem.
This is one of those stories that you're happy after the game. Yes, you can talk about the win, but it's nice that there was a story being weaved throughout this, and it was Chris Paul. CC, does Chris Paul's really just an amazing game change, his Game 5 change your perception of the arc of his career?
It's not going to change my perception, but I think it's a good question because there are people out there that would like to say that Chris Paul, he's been the type of player that should have gotten to a finals by now. It's not going to change my opinion. I've always thought he's a phenomenal player. He's been in some special situations that I wouldn't think. I didn't determine after those situations Chris Paul's not a clutch player. But when you don't get to a conference final, that's what they're going to do in the NBA. If you're a dominant player, because you're on the court so much in the playoffs, they give you more credit and more responsibility for the wins and the losses. And Chris Paul typically being the best player on all the teams he's been on. But what he did last night was phenomenal. Because with the spotlight being on Houston as far as the coach, there's question marks. Can he get it done? This team, even with 65 wins, can they get it done? Chris Paul, is he really a clutch player? You know, James Harden, is he clutch? So for me, it was phenomenal to see, and it was phenomenal to see the league MVP take the back seat. Didn't mind. And that was something I didn't think Harden had in his game until Chris Paul was added to the Houston Rockets. So it was phenomenal to see someone like Chris Paul, because knowing Chris Paul, knowing his family and everything, he's a great guy. All right. Now, he's got a reputation with some of the coaches and teammates that he might rub them a little bit the wrong way. But off the court, he's got a great reputation. It's nice to see him get some playoff success.
He is a great guy and a great player. I believe when it is all said and done for Chris Paul, there will be 2 point guards, Magic and Oscar, clearly better than him, and then you will be able to make an argument for him versus everybody else. Stockton, Isaiah, Kidd, Steph, Nash, whomever, Iverson, whomever you love. I think Chris Paul has been on that type of trajectory since basically year 2 in New Orleans, since his amazing early success when he almost won a league MVP when his second best player was David West. But you couldn't disregard the fact that no player in the history of the NBA had played more playoff games without making a conference finals. That was there. That was a real thing. No matter what the advanced metrics say about him, no matter what all his teammates say about him, no matter what the eye test says about him, to be that great and to never make the Final Four was going to be a problem for him.
So it's like he was the best player in golf. He's the best player not to win a major.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's the way we could look at it.
Absolutely, because right now I don't know if people would say Chris is the best player to never win a championship, but he certainly was, in my eyes, the greatest player in league history to never make a conference finals. And so, Jenna, the fact that he made it, but made it the way he did, with the greatest offensive quarter of his career. Never had he scored 20 in a quarter before last night. The first 40-point, 10-assist, 0-turnover game in NBA playoff history, right? It had never happened before. So for him to make it and make it that way, I felt great about it because I do love this player, and I think he's deserved some postseason success.
So we know the 41 points, and it stands out, and the 20 points in the quarter, and that stands out, and that's great. How underrated is Chris Paul defensively?
Oh, he's an amazing defensive player. I think that when people talk about Chris Paul, that's one of the calling cards that we don't talk about it because he's in the West and now he's with Houston. But when you talk about Chris Paul and the people that know basketball, when they talk about Chris Paul, they pull out the point you, Jenna. One of the top defenders in the league and have been for over 10 years. People don't talk about that, though. They like to talk about his lack of success. They talk about him and Doc Rivers not being able to get it done with the Clippers. But Chris Paul as a defender. Now, as we move on to the conference finals, we're getting ready to see. Because him and Harden versus Clay and Steph. And not only Houston's ability to be able to close games a different way, which they did last night with Chris Paul, their ability to be able to defend and defend the backcourt of Golden State is better than ever.
And on the defensive point, which is a great point to bring up, because if you're not a rim defender, we don't have a lot of great metrics, counting stats or advanced stats to quantify how good you are defensively. There's the steals category, but some people would say a lot of the guys with the average of most steals are some of the worst defenders because it means they're gambling, they're out of position. Chris Paul, when we talk about the Rockets making the huge jump defensively between last year and this year, it is not just P.J. Tucker and your guy, Luc Richard Mbah a Moute. It's the best defensive point guard of a generation. That's who Chris Paul has been. First team All-NBA defense year in, year out. And you don't always get what you deserve in sports, but Chris Paul a few years ago hit a buzzer beater in Game 7 to beat the Spurs. And I thought, okay, well, that will remove all of the choker stuff from him. But it didn't. They blow a 3-1 lead.
Yep.
He had the tough series against OKC at the end. And so now this does remove it. Now we can say there's a lot of really good players who haven't been to the finals in this league. There weren't players at this level that hadn't been to the conference finals.
Right. And even if they aren't able to get through Golden State, I don't think the same commentary that followed Chris Paul after hitting the game winner, I don't think it will follow him after facing one of the best teams that we've seen in the conference final in Golden State, with them being in their 4th straight conference final.
100%.
You also have to look at this as a win for Houston to be able to do what they did without James Harden really stepping up, without
why
having
you get him.
Yeah.
That's why you go get Chris Paul, because you are, even if you're a guy, every superstar in the league except LeBron has a history of about once a series they're going to lay a dud. You know what I mean? Whether it's Steph, whether it's KD, no matter whomever you are. And Harden has a more tattered history than that. A couple times a series he might have a bad game. That's even if he's fully healthy. Chris Paul revealed yesterday that he was a little under the weather. But that's why you go get him, Chris.
Yes.
So you can win this game, because I don't want people to underrate this. This is a game the Rockets were trailing going into the 4th quarter.
Yes.
If they lose that game, and they have to go to Utah for Game 6, we're talking a totally different situation right now. We're bringing up the 3-1. We're talking about a pick-em Game 6, and then all of a sudden, what really is the situation for the Rockets?
Yeah, Chris Paul, he'll look back on this season with a lot of accomplishments. But the most important thing for me personally is what he did. He came over. We went to watch him play against Brooklyn.
Yes.
And I hollered at him on the court, "Hey, Chris Paul, I need a picture after the game." He stopped what he was doing and was like, "I need a picture too." And Nick's wife, Danielle, had the jersey on. So him coming over work this season is one of many accomplishments.
It was great, and he is. I'm glad you mentioned it. He's my wife's all-time favorite player. He took time with her, thanks to Chris Carter. But no, the things you hear about Chris Paul off the court are 100% accurate.
That's great.
Like one of the NBA's really good guys.
All right, the Rockets can sit back now. They're on to the Western Conference Finals. Coming up, are the Warriors still on cruise control through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs? We'll set that table next on First Things First.
CeCe almost got him an 8-second violation. He said, "Hey, Chris Paul." He stops what he's doing, looks over. "What up, Hall of Famer?"
I was told I was never pretty.